Your song is not yet written. I will serve you until it is.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7, Spies. This is the episode we have been waiting for. If you are a hardcore Star Wars fan who has watched the Clone Wars and read the novels, then you were constantly pointing at the screen. And if you're just a casual fan who likes space cowboys and Baby Yoda, then this was the episode that was easy to understand and it clarified some of the season's more confusing aspects, like the differences in Mandalorian religions. Every dangling plot thread comes together for this two-part finale. The Pershing Coruscant episode, the bureaucracy of the New Republic, the mythosaur, the Mandalorian cultural divides, and the looming threat of the real big bad of the series, Grand Admiral Thrawn. But don't worry, I'm here to explain who all these people are and how this show is brilliantly setting up the rise of the First Order. Yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry, man, my head, I'm not thinking straight. I gotta eat something.
Person, did you just bite into a brick of stale brown sugar?
I did, and it really hurt a lot.
Buddy, it's springtime. You gotta start eating healthy. I mean, you look a mess.
You're right, I'll start eating better. So let's get back to the Easter eggs.
Hey, what happened to your beard?
In some shots, my beard is shorter.
Okay then.
We start with Elia Kane on Coruscant. Now you'll remember that in that Pershing episode, she gained the cloner's trust only to turn him into the New Republic. She made him think that the New Republic officers were torturing him so he would turn against that government. She also popped up in Tim Meadows' office reminding him that they couldn't help out in Navarro.
They have yet to sign the charter. They're not a member planet.
And now we see why. She was working for Moff Gideon all along.
What?
She is his agent in the New Republic. Now, this part of Coruscant is called the lower levels, very much inspired by Blade Runner. So the top of the skyscrapers is where the elites live, where the senators have their fancy parties, it's where the Jedi Council meets. This is the seedy underbelly of the city that we first saw in Attack of the Clones.
You wanna buy some death sticks?
Now, once upon a time, Lucasfilm was going to create a live-action show called Star Wars Underworld that was going to take place on these lower levels and set between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And according to producer Rick McCallum, they had written around 100 scripts for the show, but it was too expensive to produce. However, there is a visual effects test reel that they released online. It's very cool to look at, sort of a proto-Mandalorian show. Shout out to Heavy Spoilers for pointing out that this is also like the Cancel Boba Fett game 1313. There's lots of Arabesh in this opener. These letters here spell out AHKQ, FDG, AOFRN, and cybernetics, which could be a reference to the different cybernetics that people have installed. So, Kane meets with Gideon through an Imperial probe droid like we first saw in The Empire Strikes Back. You know the droid is evil because it's got a red light, like Lola when Reva reprogrammed her in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, I'm surprised that probe droids can just fly around Coruscant because they were only used by the Empire. There was even the top of one above the Blue Squadron bar right here. It just goes to show how little control the New Republic had of the planet.
Oh my God, what are you eating?
Oh, this? Why, this is chimichurri filet mignon with zesty potatoes, zucchini, and it is delicious.
Did you hire a chef? Cause I didn't approve that in the budget.
Nope, no chef, no takeout, and I didn't make this either. This is a meal from Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. This meal is delicious, nutritious, and ready to eat. You see, you got me thinking, Doug, spring is here, and I want to get out and do stuff. I don't want to spend a lot of time like cooking every meal. So now I can skip the grocery store with a ready-to-eat Factor meal that is delivered straight to my front door, always fresh and never frozen. The meals are ready in just 2 minutes, and now I'm eating better. The meals are only around 550 calories per serving, and they offer more than 34 chef-prepared meals. Everything from vegan, keto, calorie smart, and then there's this meal, which is part of the Gourmet Plus selection. These meals are a great option for when you want something a little more special. The steak is even tender after reheating, not dry or tough at all. You also get premium produce like broccolini to complement your protein. So I've been using Factor for several months now, and it's had a big improvement on my daily life. On really busy days like today, when we're just trying to pump out videos, a good meal is essential to staying focused. I actually don't know where I would be without Factor.
You'd be eating raw brown sugar.
You're not wrong. So you have to give Factor a try. Head to factor75.com and use the promo code ScreenCrush50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thanks again to Factor for sponsoring this video. Back to the Easter eggs. Kane's clearance number is a TK number like the ones given to stormtroopers.
TK421, why aren't you at your post?
Hey, what's TK stand for?
Trooper Corps, I think, like Corps with a K.
Ah yes, very space Nazi, yes.
So Kane reports in, reporting that the pirates on Navarro were actually working for Gideon. Now I think this is because Gideon wanted to return to his base on that planet so he could reclaim the cloning lab that we saw in Season 2. After all, if Pershing turns against the New Republic, then maybe he'd come back to work for Gideon on Navarro.
Yeah, you know, what's up with Gideon and cloning anyways? That's confusing.
Well, that's a good question, Doug the manager. Now, we had assumed that Gideon was the one who was trying to clone the Emperor, so he could return in Rise of Skywalker. He says that he wanted Grogu's blood
to bring order back to the galaxy.
And he also apparently needed midi-chlorians from Grogu's blood, because Pershing talks about having a higher M count, in other words, midi-chlorian count. This would be so he could make the clone Force sensitive. But then, on Navarro, we see figures in these chambers who look a lot like Snoke. Now, since Palpatine had a whole jar of Snokes on his planet, we assumed that Gideon was working to clone Palpatine. But this episode completely upended that theory.
The creation of clones is your obsession, not mine.
So Gideon's cloning experiments were being done in secret away from the other Imperial leaders. I think there could be two reasons for this. One, his best car-wearing troops at the end could possibly be clones. But I doubt it. The clone army had to be grown with an accelerated growing process, but they still took 10 years to mature. Gideon does not have the resources to grow an army, train them, and educate them, all the process we saw in the Clone Wars. Although he does walk past all of these cloning tanks that could contain his new clone troops. I think it's far more likely that Gideon was the original person who was trying to clone Snoke. He wanted a clone that was loyal to him and could use the Force. That way, he can install a Force-sensitive figurehead as the leader of the new Empire, while he was the real power behind the throne. Dante Bruno on Twitter theorized that maybe Kane was trying to take Pershing out of commission to delay Project Necromancer, and instead to further Gideon's own program, which would be cloning a jar of Snokes. Now, at some point, Palpatine or his acolytes learned of this and used the Snoke clone as Palpatine's proxy.
I made Snoke. I have been every voice you have ever heard.
Or maybe Gideon is just trying to live forever by having Pershing grow him new organs.
Had simple organ cloning been available on my home world, her death would have been easily preventable.
But I'm getting just a little bit ahead of myself here. Let's talk about this Imperial Shadow Council. Gideon's meeting room is protected by these multiple red blast shields, very much like the ones that separated Obi-Wan from Qui-Gon Jinn when he was killed by Darth Maul. He meets with the Shadow Council via hologram, very similar to how the Jedi Council met during the Clone Wars, or how the New Republic leaders meet in the Ahsoka trailer. It's also interesting that the lights above the chamber form a circle, but the circle is incomplete. So anytime good guys meet, like the Senate or the Jedi Council, it's always in a circle. Like the Knights of the Round Table, it has no head, so it is a body of equals.
We're Knights of the Round Table, we dance where we're able.
Whereas when Sidious meets with the Trade Federation, he is at the head of the table. The Emperor's throne is always the focus of attention, because the Jedi work as a circle, but the Sith work as a pyramid, with only one at the top. So this meeting room being a circle implies that this is a council of equals, except there are gaps in the lights, indicating they're missing leaders, Palpatine and Thrawn, and maybe how they're also trying to piece together missing parts of Palpatine's DNA. Gideon informs them about the Mandalorians reuniting, and we hear,
Those two factions are sworn enemies.
and you know what, guys? Filoni, Favreau, you guys, it would have been really great to have heard that a few episodes ago. I think a lot of casual fans out there who have been confused by Mandalorian politics really could have used this exposition at the start of the season. Just saying. The Shadow Council begins by saying that the New Republic is weak, but
It show no sign of our true strength.
now this line made me giddy. All through this show, we've been saying that the Empire are scattered remnants and warlords, but what we've seen here is that they have actually reinvented themselves as a new kind of rebellion. Like the early rebel cells, they are separate, but they are connected through hidden leaders. So I want to take a moment to explain like what the hell happened to the Empire right after Return of the Jedi. A lot of this has been explored in comics, novels, and video games, so some of you may need to be caught up. Now we all remember, in Return of the Jedi, the Emperor was defeated, Vader turned good, and the Empire was overthrown. We even saw a statue of the Emperor being torn down on Coruscant as people celebrated across the galaxy. But Chuck Wendig's wonderful novel Aftermath showed us that immediately following that celebration, a riot broke out as Imperials cracked down on the celebration. The remaining Imperials did reorganize under a leader called Gallius Rax and an admiral named Ray Sloan. More on them in a second. So Palpatine's death triggered an event called Operation Cinder. Essentially, Palpatine reasoned that if the Empire wasn't strong enough to protect its emperor, then it didn't deserve to exist.
Operation Cinder is to begin at once.
So Operation Cinder was a salting the Earth program where Imperials destroyed their own worlds, so the New Republic couldn't get access to their resources.
Entire city gone in moments, along with everybody in it. Man, that was like 10,000 people.
In addition, the Emperor handpicked a man named Gallius Rax to carry out a plan that he called the contingency.
What was the contingency?
Well, Rax assembled the original Shadow Council of high-ranking Imperial leaders to mount a counteroffensive against the Rebel Alliance. Or at least that's the lie that he told them. In reality, he was gathering the remaining Rebel and Imperial fleets to the desert planet of Jakku. There, he was going to detonate a secret bomb in the planet's core, which would destroy the planet and wipe out both fleets. Then, Rax was supposed to take the best of the Empire to the unknown regions of the galaxy and rebuild. But what happened instead is that the Imperial forces were defeated. Jakku was the final battle of the war, which is why Rey was scavenging all those ships there in The Force Awakens. But an Imperial admiral named Rey Sloane stopped Rax from blowing up the planet. Instead, Rey Sloane and a few other Imperials went off to rebuild the Empire in the unknown regions. Now, one of those Imperials, Brindle Hux, began the program to train child soldiers to become a new generation of stormtroopers. This is why Finn says,
I was taken from a family I'll never know.
Hux? Hey, that sounds familiar.
Because this guy, Brindle Hux, is the abusive father of Armitage Hux, the First Order leader from the sequel trilogy. And get this, he's played by Brian Gleason, the actual brother of Hux actor Domhnall Gleeson. And the character got the idea to train child soldiers from the Jedi Padawan program. But at this point, the Imperials are waiting for someone, a brilliant tactical leader who will bring the Empire out of its ashes.
Is it Sam Worthington?
No, why would it be Sam Worthington?
I don't know, I just hear people talking about Sam Worthington sometimes.
No, it's Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Who?
So, Thrawn deserves his own explainer video, so I'll keep this brief. Thrawn is a Chiss, that is a group of aliens from the unknown regions of the galaxy. He originally joined the Empire to study the Emperor's forces to see if they were a threat to his people, the Chiss ascendancy. But he rocketed through the Imperial ranks, despite not even being a human, because he is such a brilliant tactician. One of his signature skills is to study his opponents through their culture's art.
To defeat an enemy, you must know them. Not simply their battle tactics, but their history, philosophy, art.
After doing this, he can successfully predict everything his opponent will do. Now, during the rebellion, Thrawn advocated spending resources developing a new type of TIE fighter called the TIE Defender, which would include like shields and a hyperdrive. Instead, resources went toward building the Death Star, and the Death Star was defeated by X-Wing fighters. Had Thrawn's TIE Defenders been defending the Death Star at the Battle of Yavin, then it probably never would have exploded.
What do you mean they blew up the Death Star?
In the show Rebels, Thrawn was fighting a Jedi apprentice named Ezra Bridger when Ezra used the hyperspace traveling whales called Purgil to blink him and Thrawn out to parts unknown of the galaxy. Since then, they have both been missing. Ahsoka Tano was looking for Thrawn last season.
Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?
And we saw Sabine Wren looking at a hologram of Ezra in the trailer for that show. Now, it looks like Thrawn is going to be the overarching big bad of all these shows, probably culminating in the movie that Dave Filoni is going to direct, which will assemble a kind of Star Wars Avengers.
Hey, we made a video about that.
Yes, we did, and it was a good one.
That was a good one.
And one final note, Thrawn will be played by Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced him in Rebels. And he is the older brother of Mads Mikkelsen, who played the Death Star's designer, Galen Erso. The other named member of the Shadow Collective was Paleon. Now, he was the Imperial commander who served alongside Thrawn in the Legends novels, the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Great reads, so good, I'll probably reread them. Now, Gideon throws cold water on the idea of Thrawn returning.
Grand Admiral Thrawn is missing from your delegation. Any word on when he will be able to participate in the Shadow Council?
When he does this, they all look pretty happy at the prospect of becoming the proxy leader of the Empire until Palpatine returns. This is ultimately why the Empire failed. The Emperor created a system where everyone was jockeying for power instead of serving the greater good. This carried on into the First Order.
I don't care if you win. I need Kylo Ren to lose.
They also mention Project Necromancy. So necromancy means to raise the dead, so this is referring to bringing back Palpatine.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
In the animated show The Bad Batch, which takes place just after Revenge of the Sith, we see that the Emperor has been working to clone himself for decades at a facility called Mount Tantus. Now, it is interesting that Gideon is doing his own cloning thing and hiding it from the others. This is kind of like Giancarlo Esposito's other villain character, Gus Fring, in the series Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. In those shows, Gus was working for the Mexican cartel, but secretly sets up his own super lab to become a rival for the cartel's business. Overall, I love this scene. It's like the Death Star Council in A New Hope. It's a zippy way to catch us up on the status of the galaxy without getting bogged down in political discourse. Then we go back to Navarro, where the people are repairing the damage caused by the pirate battle. We see Jawas working on the base of the IG-11 statue and the white tour guide protocol droid as the Imperial cruiser blots out the sun. So in the movie Independence Day, this effect was used by the ships as a way to symbolically say that the sun was setting on the human race. And here, I think we're meant to think that for a moment before Grief Karga points out the enormous mythosaur skull painted on the ship.
It was an Imperial ship. Look at the markings.
Did anyone else laugh when they saw Grogu sitting on Bo-Katan's lap? Like, she's a badass warrior queen, but she still lets the baby sit on her lap and pretend to drive. It goes a long way to make casual Star Wars fans like her. I mean, if the baby trusts her, then so can we. So the two factions meet face to face. Paz Vizsla, always ready for a fight, says,
"Take the children inside."
Which makes us think that it's all about to go down. And it might have if the armorer hadn't interrupted with a sound that's music to every Mandalorian's ears, the clanging of hammers. And then Karga gives Den and Grogu gifts. Den gets a bottle of booze and Grogu gets IG-12. So remember, this was the assassin droid that was voiced by writer-director Dreamweaver plus actor Taika Waititi, who sacrificed himself in Season 1. Den enlisted the Anzellans to rebuild him, but his memory circuits were fried. And now he lives on as a kind of Krang bot for Grogu to operate and communicate through. And I love how Grogu cooed when he saw the Anzellan. And the Anzellan immediately just shuts him down.
Bad baby. No, it's squeezy.
Because of what happened last time.
No, Grogu. Not a pet.
No, it's squeezy.
Grogu is overjoyed to get this thing, like every kid who ever wanted a Power Wheel.
Power wheels! Now I'm driving for real!
I mean, this makes total sense. Think about it. Grogu has been carried around for his whole life, being saved by others. But now he has agency. He has the means to move himself around and to eat all the num-nums that he wants. And he expresses his joy through the voice of Taika Waititi.
Yes, what?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And this yes button seems to be making fun of the viral TikTok videos of dogs hitting yes and no buttons.
Tacky. Just tacky.
Okay, so he goes to a fruit stand operated by a Tarsant and steals a melee run fruit, which we first saw in Star Wars Rebels. But food is used to show a major cultural division among the Mandalorians. A few episodes ago, we saw Bo-Katan learning how to eat with the old way Mandalorians.
How do you eat when other people are around?
You don't. When you get your food, you go off to find a place where you can take off your helmet.
Now, for the ones who follow the way, eating is a private act, but for most cultures, eating is communal, a way to break bread and fellowship with others. At the feast, they spit roast these two creatures. Now, these could be the creatures that lived out on the lava flats, or they could be the babies that they took from the nest a few episodes ago.
But they were foundlings.
And now they're delicious foundlings. We have the return of Axe Woves and Casca Reeves, who is played by wrestler Mercedes Vernado, formerly known as the wrestler Sasha Banks.
You know, she's Snoop Dogg's cousin.
Yeah, I knew that.
So fresh, y'all. Snoop Dogg and Sasha Banks, we're the best, y'all.
And by the way, everybody, if you like what we do here and you enjoy the channel, maybe you would like this Somehow Palpatine Return shirt or this Doug the Foundling shirt at our merch store at shopzeroedition.com. We also have this original trilogy tee and lots of other cool merch that I think you'd enjoy. Shopping our merch store is a great way to support our channel, and you can find the link in the description. So, Bo-Katan soothes any potential divides during this dinner by uniting her people with a quest. She wants them to
send down a small recon party. We'll scout the surface, find out what remains of the Great Forge, and establish a safe perimeter.
She warns them that
dormant species have been awakened from the bombings.
Now, of course, later this pays off with the kaiju, but in episode 2, she also saw the mythosaur, which I'm sure we're going to see next week.
So freaking effing excited!
Also, giant subterranean species being awakened by a bomb is like how the Zillo Beast was unearthed on Malastare in the show The Clone Wars. She asked for volunteers from both tribes because the best way to get two Mandalorians to like each other is to give them a common enemy. And the scene is very reminiscent of Han asking for mission volunteers in Return of the Jedi.
Count me in.
I'm with you too.
But also, this contrasts with the Shadow Council from earlier in the episode. While the Imperials are distrustful and working on their own agendas, these Mandalorians are learning to trust one another. So, they board the light cruiser, which was stolen from Gideon in Season 2's finale, as they all relive the horror of Mandalore's destruction.
I was here when it happened.
You'll notice that some of these Mandalorians still have the insignia of Death Watch. Now, Death Watch was the group of warlike Mandalorians who lived on Mandalore's moon, Concordia. Later, the armorer says,
Death Watch exists no longer. It's shattered into many warring factions.
Now, we actually saw Death Watch fracture during the Clone Wars. When Maul took control of the group, Bo-Katan led a rebellion against him. Some members of Death Watch saved Din Djarin from battle droids and then split off to become the Children of the Watch. The surface of Mandalore is glass because that's what you get when you superheat sand. They've barely touched down when a ship appears carrying Mandalorian survivors. Their captain is played by Charles Parnell, who has been around for years, but you might recognize him from Top Gun Maverick. They're on a skiff that is very much like Jabba's. Now, in Return of the Jedi, the skiff was meant to evoke pirates, making the heroes walk the plank. But here, it's a metaphor for how they're all castaways, lost adrift in the sea of stars that we call a galaxy. At the dinner table, where Bo-Katan sits at the head place, mind you, she finally tells the story of what happened when Mandalore fell. Now, her arc on Rebels ended with the Mandalorians swearing fealty to her to fight the Empire.
Clan Vizsla is with you.
Clan Rook is with you.
Clan Elder is with you.
Clan Kreese is with you.
She tells them that the ISB sent her a message. The ISB is like the Imperial spy network that we saw a lot of in Andor. She references the Night of 1,000 Tears. Now that is when the Empire basically terror bombed the entire surface, destroying all Mandalorian cities.
Like Independence Day.
Exactly, high five. So it turns out that Gideon never took the Darksaber in combat. She surrendered it to him to save her people. And instead of honoring this agreement, Gideon crawled out and instituted the Great Purge, stealing all the Beskar from the planet.
But if there's no more Beskar, then wouldn't Mandalore be worthless?
Well, I have a feeling that the mythosaur is sitting on top of a mountain of Beskar, and the season will end with the Mandalorians winning, finding the Beskar, and reigniting the Great Forge. After the Armorer says that her people were safe on Concordia, Bo-Katan drops the key line of the season.
Mandalore has always been too powerful for any enemy to defeat. It is always our own division that destroys us.
Bo-Katan has tried to unite the Mandalorians before, and each time it has just fallen apart. I think she's come to believe that it's impossible for Mandalorians to stay united, until Den gave her this kick-ass pep talk.
Your song is not yet written. I will serve you until it is.
It got me straight in the feels, guys. I love this series. Den does not have to be the main character of every story. He can be a side character in the story of Bo-Katan. The Armorer returns to the ship, probably so we'll have a point of view character where the Imperials attack the fleet in the next episode. She also could have diffused any fight with her own people and Bo-Katan's group, but instead, Axe Woves and Paz Vizsla get pissy over a game of space chess.
These primitives make up their own rules for everything.
Now this is like how some people play the game Chinese checkers with dumb rules that say you can't jump backwards, but other people play it the right way when the marbles can jump whichever direction they want.
Wow, I thought you were going to let that go.
Never. But I do respect that Paz is so dedicated to the right way to play. He's like Walter in The Big Lebowski.
Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
The fight kicks off, but Grogu stops them because no one can harm a baby. And I loved how Den said this.
You didn't learn that from me.
Because peace and mediation is something that he would have learned at the Jedi Temple or from Luke. And one of the people the Armorer returned to the ship was played by Charles Baker, aka Skinny Pete from Breaking Bad. So we don't get a mythosaur in this episode, but the kaiju that rises up seems to be directly inspired by the Anguirus, the subterranean kaiju that was Godzilla's first opponent, who later became Godzilla's best friend. This is the same kaiju who also inspired the Pokemon Sandslash. They find the Great Forge, and it's a very lonely, sad moment, like when the Fellowship finds the abandoned mines of Moria.
Oh, no.
Except now, we remember how the Armorer described this place.
It was large and ornate, and the air rang with the music of 100 hammers.
And then Gideon's new troops attack. These are the next generation of the Dark Troopers. Those were the droid fighters that Luke cut down like grass last season. Now Beskar is immune to lightsaber blades, probably one reason that Gideon upgraded them. But also, I mean, they had to use all that plundered Beskar for something. Now in the show Rebels, we did see that Mandalorians who were loyal to the Empire wore similar armor with jetpacks, and their helmets also had horns, like Moff Gideon's. Heavy spoilers also pointed out that the design looks a little more like the Stormtroopers of the First Order, as we can see them edging toward that design. And Marshall Tushton on Twitter pointed out that the kill marks on the helmets look a lot like Joe Johnston's original design for Boba Fett.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah, buddy, shoot.
If Beskar is so strong, then how come they can blast all the troopers and kill them?
Well, that's a great question. So if you look close, the blast that hit the Beskar portions just kind of knocked them back with a concussive force, while the blast that killed them hit them at the exposed joints of the armor. The Mandalorians might be great warriors, but they're crappy tacticians. They're easily drawn in for a trap, and no one even thinks, hey, gee, these hallways look shiny and new.
It's a trap!
But we do get a hallway fight!
Y'all ready for this?
They are lured into a hangar filled with TIE Interceptors, the next-gen TIE fighters that we first saw in Return of the Jedi, and that Bo-Katan just kind of dismissed out of hand a few episodes ago.
Where'd they come from?
I've scoped off a lot of Imperial warlords.
Gregor Wilderman on Twitter pointed out that they hang themselves upside down to emulate bats. A door drops to divide them, isolating Den and being kind of a metaphor for the Mandalorian people as a whole because they are so divided. Then Gideon arrives wearing his own Beskar armor like we have theorized.
Anakin, I was right.
See, the opening credits have shown a Mandalorian helmet tinted with a red light, a clear indication that some bad guy was going to be wearing some kind of Mandalorian armor. Now it is interesting that his helmet has horns on it like the followers of Darth Maul. Some of Maul's followers, like Gar Saxon, ended up joining the Empire. Gideon could be a former Mandalorian who swore allegiance to Maul and then later swore allegiance to the Empire, just like Gar Saxon did. Gideon says,
Mandalore will live on in me.
Now, all season long, we have been talking about the religious metaphors of this season. Harvard theologian Ryan Adams pointed out to us that the children of the Watch are like ultra-Orthodox Jews, who believe in a more strict way of life and always cover their heads. In fact, they even refer to this as the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This fragment from Mandalore also contains a passage from the book of Exodus about the Jews finding a home in Israel. We've also had baptisms and episodes titled Convert and Apostate. Jason Wepley on Twitter even pointed out that they walk on Mandalore 2 by 2, just like the animals on Noah's Ark, because like the animals, they are resettling this land after a disaster. And D4 Phillips also knows that there are 12 Mandalorians plus Grogu, like the 12 tribes of Israel plus the lost 13th tribe. Earth. And now, Moff Gideon is setting himself up as kind of an antichrist figure, or he's like the Philistines who conquered Israel while the Jews were enslaved. He is a pretender who claims to be the new voice of the homeland, but who can never understand the true mystical power beneath the sands of the desert, in this case, the mythosaur. Gideon is also a biblical name. In the book of Judges, a warrior named Gideon leads 300 men to defeat a large army of nomads, destroys their shrines to Baal, and replaces them with shrines to Yahweh. Then his son became king of Israel. Now the parallel doesn't exactly line up because Gideon was a hero, but it does show how Moff Gideon is trying to erase a culture and establish his own rule in its place. He says,
"Every society has something to offer. The cloners, the Jedi, and even the Mandalorians."
And this is such an Imperial attitude. As we saw in Andor, the Empire was structured like a machine. It had systems of control, functions, operations, and even saw the rest of the galaxy as just parts of this machine. The people of Aldhani had this wonderful custom of gathering together to watch the Eye, a grand meteor shower. But the Empire dwindled this native gathering from tens of thousands to just a few hundred. But even the Empire was cowed by the beauty of the Eye, and I think that in the next episode, we're going to see the mythosaur rise up and defeat Gideon. D4 Phillips on Twitter pointed out the similarities between this episode and the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Israelites returned to Jerusalem to build their temple, or forge, after their captivity in Babylon. So, Din is trapped.
Hey, how come Bo-Katan didn't just cut a hole in the door and save him with the darksaber?
Because then all of her people would have been killed.
Oh, I see. That is a fair point.
Gideon gives her another chance to surrender the darksaber to save her people, but she learned from her mistakes and lives to fight another day. And then we get the last stand of Paz Vizsla. He dies happy, though, with his enemy's throat in his hands.
Yo, you mad in the morning?
Notice he fires his minigun so much that it heats up and melts. And then he just throws it down and does hand-to-hand combat afterwards. And man, oh god, this is so great. The Praetorian guards that Gideon asked for show up. Now these are the elite guards that guided Snoke in The Last Jedi. And then Kylo Ren and Rey gave us the best fight of the trilogy against them. These are the next-gen guards of Palpatine's personal guards. And the term Praetorian Guard is actually taken from the Roman army. These troops protected the Roman senators and elites who controlled the government. Now, we've already seen how badass these guards were in the movie, so we know that Paz Vizsla did not even stand a chance against them. And honestly, neither does Din Djarin. Grogu might be able to fight them with the Force, which would actually be a nice reversal from last season, when Din was the one who had to rescue Grogu from Gideon. Now, that could be reversed. The Praetorian Guards also give us this beautiful connection to the sequel trilogy, connecting these Imperial remnants to Snoke. The guards expertly penetrate the gaps in Paz's armor as he dies, much in the same way that Captain Thorne did in the Clone Wars. But don't worry, because I happen to know that there's a little Vizsla on the way. And the way he's lying on the ground mirrors the death of Kuiil in the penultimate episode of Season 1. And just a reminder, everyone, to take the hassle out of eating healthy, give Factor a try. Head to Factor75.com and use my promo code ScreenCrush50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. But we want to hear from all of you guys about The Mandalorian. What did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.